begin, and then Robbie, and then me. So,
Pat, I really enjoyed your speech, and I'm focusing on three things today. First of all, your body language. Secondly, how effectively did you use the knowledge of experts? And finally, did the concept connect to me as a worker or a person who didn't know much about the situation of learning to lean? First of all, on your body language. Pat, you have an excellent presence. I noticed that right away. You immediately stepped out in front of the lectern and you connected to us as audience members. You have a very comfortable stance. It felt very personal to me. And you have really good eye contact as well. And one thing I noticed about your eyes is that they're bright. And your facial expressions are bright. And it really drew me in and made it a lot easier to listen to what you had to say. You were to draw on experts' opinions. The big point that you made was the Toyota family, and you gave us all the history of Toyota, etc. And that was great. Good examples. I would have also liked to have heard you say something about other companies or other people who have used this lean concept, what their successes have been, and how that has worked for them as well. So we get a bit more broader experience behind it. The concept itself was brand new to me. I hadn't heard of it. It never was discussed in my company before I left it. And so I was very curious to find out what it was. So what you did was you pitched it to us in a fashion that you recognized and acknowledged the fact that we are all at different places. Some of us may have heard of it before, some of us may not have, and I like that as well. You use the term Kaizen, meaning continuous improvement. You used it twice that I recall hearing. The first time you said Kaizen, continuous improvement, and I wasn't really sure whether or not that was what it meant. The second time you did explain that it was a Japanese term. And I would have liked to have heard that the first time, just so I knew for sure what you were talking about. Then at the end you asked us the question, how can this apply to us in our lives? And gave us a few examples to start the ball rolling. But then your voice trailed off a little bit at the end, and it wasn't full of the brightness that I had experienced through the rest of the speech, so I was a little bit disappointed about that. I asked myself the question, if I had to summarize lean in one sentence, what would it be? And you tell me if I got the concept correctly. What I heard most is if there's a problem, you need to stop and correct it right away. It's a continuous improvement thing that's got to be going on constantly. Am I correct?
You're correct.
Okay, then you did a good job.
Thank you, Faith. Pat, my goal today was to find out how interesting the talk was to the audience, and could the speaker have built on a greater interest. First of all, since I know the lean technique a little bit, so I really commend you for bringing this big concept, a lengthy concept, into a very short amount of time. So the continuous improvement message, I did get it, and you did an excellent job. I like your style. The best part about your speech was that your speech vignettes, these short stories in your speech, really flowed very well, and you had a link between one short story to the next one. And I found that, for instance, when you started your speech, you started with a personal story, and then you talked about how Pat would not be so interested in learning about this lean process, and then you brought us into the lean process. Very honest that not everyone is interested about some process. So I like that technique of linking your stories, talking about stories. I believe that was your technique today, is to use storytelling technique to share with us a complex technique, a complex subject. That worked really well. I do notice that when you have to connect with the audience, when you want to share a story, you step outside of the lectern, go into the audience, and then come back. And I believe there was only this moment behind the lectern which kind of tied you. Knowing you for a long time now, you are a vivacious going outside, going to the crowd to share your story. So that was your uncomfort zone. So my recommendation is forget about the lecture. none of us knew what topics you were going to cover, so whatever you cover is good with us. So I would like you to do that. The second suggestion I have is employ this technique. Share the theory or the technique, give a short story about the technique, and then tell the audience what they would learn from it or how the audience can learn from it. So technique plus story plus audience will be an even better way of connecting with the audience. Use that maybe for a 10-minute speech, three techniques, 3 short stories, and 3 ways in how the audience can feel, oh, what's in it for me? Ah, that is a technique, that is the story I'll remember, and that is what I will do. So when we leave this room, we want to remember those stories, and your call to action will be even more effective if we can remember those 3. If I were to make slight modification to your speech, I'd like to hear the story back to you, what you and Pat were having, or tell I should say. How it went back, and maybe something in your personal life got changed, got improved, that we can then take, you know what, it worked for Pat, maybe it will work for us too. Overall, I enjoyed the short presentation, not a lot of technology or theory in this whole thing. I loved the stories that you used, and that is what I'll remember when I leave this room. Thank you.
Pat, I love the speech. I am an ADHD type, so wait a second, you had interesting information and you just kept it going. Yay! So I have one in this speech. What I'm addressing is defining the scope of the speech and fitting it into the allotted time. I think you did a great job, as I said, presenting interesting information and then wrapping it up at the end. You went a minute over, but in this venue, it was a good choice to spend the time to wrap it up well. When I was making notes on the speech, I'm expecting to hear history, applying it, and personalizing it to me. And then what you ended up covering was mainly, to me, history, but it was interesting history. And I ended up deciding the same thing that Ravi did. It was, what I'd like to hear is the story, and then, aha, here was the learning that came from that particular point in the story. And we write that down, and then we tell more of the story, and then, aha, give the message, because people do tie concepts to the story and buy in on that level. I think if you're trying to talk coworkers into the process, you'll have to do more on the tying it to them, but with specific examples of things they might do. And that's much harder in a general audience because you don't know exactly what they might be doing in their life, in their work. I personally was very interested in the story, and part of the reason I was interested in it was, but see, I'm not actually having to apply it in my work. So from the point of view of the current audience, it was a good choice to focus on the history because the history is going to be interesting to everyone. And also, we're all motivated on our own to apply continuous improvement in our lives, as stated by the theme of the meeting. On the whole, it really was interesting. I bought into the concept, didn't necessarily think of all the ways I could apply it in my life, but I did grasp the general concept and go with the story and go, yes, that's interesting and something I'd like to learn more about, which is really all you can hope for in a 10-minute speech. Thank you. All right, we now open. Oh, Pat, sorry.
Excuse me. Thank you all. This was excellent feedback. I'm just getting started in this Lean Leadership program at work. And applying Lean, I've been involved with it over at least the last 4 or 5 years in different ways or shapes and projects at work. So now I'm in I will be in the role of teacher and coach. And so each one of you said something that would help me in that, and I really appreciate this. I'm going to go back and look at this video. And anything anybody else can tell me, it's a huge topic. and there's a lot to cull down. And if I brought a huge topic to my team members, my gosh, people would turn me off as the flavor of the month. So, you know, like we mentioned, so this is a big help, so thank you very much, appreciate it.
Now, fun.
As a huge topic, when you are going to be coaching and teaching on this, you will then be able to address it in different chunks, right?
Right.
Because, yeah, I could have listened to you go on longer on this too, because there was so much to be said. And my other comment was that I noticed is sometimes you speak very fast.
I do.
And I think because of the level of depth of the topic, some of those people in your audience might need it coming a little slower.
Yes, thank you, I appreciate that.
I may have missed it because I listened slowly, but I didn't know why it's called LEAD, whether that's an acronym or where that word comes from, and I was waiting for you to tell me.
You know, that's a good question. I mean, I have to go back and read that in the book again because, you know, actually, I just reread the book again this week, and it's not an acronym. It is not an acronym, and actually, it does have a lot to do with cutting out the waste, and you know, continuous improvement is cutting out the waste, and that's I think that's where it's been culled down. The lean movement. It wasn't a Toyota person that developed the lean concept. It was a Toyota leader that developed it from the teachings of the Toyota family. And so if anybody else knows it, you know.
Yeah, it does have to do with the elimination of waste in
Muda,
an organization, the idea of value and non-value added activities.
Exactly.
What you do is you eliminate the non-value added activities and try and focus more on value added.
Right. So that's really, I think, where the leaning up of the organization was called.
I wanted you to tell me that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. That's a good point. Really good point.
As somebody who has been through Kaizen and has a spouse who has been through Kaizen, I love the way you present. First of all, you're enthusiastic and you're passionate about what you're doing. And you're not passionate specifically for the topic itself, but for what it can do to help the organization and the people who are part of that organization. Because when you are working with people, they want to do a better job, and you're going to help them do that. That has to be the focus, because otherwise, if you say, well, the company is way off, and then we have got so much work to do, and it just is no fun at all. And I think that my husband's organization did not make it fun. I went through it, and it was totally different, and I was totally on board. He had to be dragged.
Yes.
And I think that that's the difference. So I appreciate your passion and your focus.
Good. Good. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Number two.